Hello and welcome to the Sensory Hour with me, David Demakin. Today I've got I'm very excited for my guest. Her name is Steph Curtis. She contacted me through Twitter and we got discussing certain things. And she has a daughter who has a PDA profile. And for an autism specialist, as you would have heard in my last podcast about World Autism Awareness Day, I work with a few students with a PDA profile, and I have worked with maybe 5 or 6 throughout my time teaching and supporting and putting strategies in place for children of all ages. PDA is a fascinating one for me because there's really a little understanding around it. I always maybe cause a little bit of shall we say stick to myself on Twitter and things like that when people say to me, oh, it is autism and PDA, it is big, and the awareness is out there, and it should be up to people to now put those sort of things in place in businesses and social situations and schools. And I would say to them that for someone that's been working in it for 10 years, I would strongly disagree with that, and that even in my time in a special school, PDA was very misunderstood. And we had the PDA Society come down and interview and do tasks and training days and handouts and all of that sort of stuff with us, which is just superb, and it was really invaluable stuff. So if you'd want to find out more about PDA, I recommend the PDA Society online. Check out their Twitter feed as well. Really, really positive stuff on there. So that's why I'm really excited about having Steph on the podcast today, because she's just going to talk about her experiences, talk about these things that she noticed, signs that her daughter was presenting very early on. And I think that, in my role, that parental advice and parental input is invaluable, and the parents know the child best, and it always dumbfounds me a little bit when schools don't use the tools at their disposal, and the parents are number one tools to use. They know the child the best. They may be able to give you hints and tips and give you a little bit of a greater understanding around the child. There's another lady who I'm going to interview who has a son who is a PDA profile, and when discussing with her, she spoke to me that she actually designed the EHCP herself because she knew what her child needed at school. She knew the triggers, she knew everything, and she wrote it herself to pass over to the school. And now it's gone really, really positive at the school, and they're making good strides. Obviously, there's a bit of progression and regression, which we'll talk about with Steph when she jumps on the phone line in a little bit. If you're listening to this and you're not really fully aware what PDA is, I've pulled up the PDA Society webpage, and I've just clicked on About PDA, and I'm just going to read a few lines because there's a few really telling bits in what they've said. So I'll just read out a few lines now. So, pathological demand avoidance is now widely recognised as a distinct profile of autism. Individuals with PDA profile will share similar difficulties to others on the autism spectrum, such as social communication difficulties, social interaction difficulties, and restrictive and repetitive patterns of behaviour, including sensory seeking or sensory avoiding behaviour. Now, if we scroll down slightly, they talk about the actual demand avoidance section, which says, however, for those with a PDA profile, the demand avoidance is different from that which on the autism spectrum might experience because of its extreme nature and obsessive quality. This extreme avoidance extends to the most basic demands of everyday living and is not limited to the avoidance of unpleasant, difficult, specific, anxiety-provoking or unappealing tasks. Someone with a PDA profile will also have tremendous difficulty in complying with their own self-imposed expectations and with doing things that they really want to do. And that jumps out to me greatly because what I am taking from that is that simply PDA is just a branch off the autism tree. It is linked with autism, but actually it is something, is its own complete total entity, and that is how I would describe it to anyone. And I think that's how probably Steph, without speaking to her greatly on the subject, will also describe it, as that there are two very distinct traits, shall we say, with autism and with PDA. And if you work with children with autism or the autistic spectrum, and you work with children who show a PDA profile, you'll be able to see the differences. The other thing as well that jumps out to me, that there's non-compliance even in tasks that they want to do, and that is something that is such a difficult thing to understand for people that don't know a great deal about autism or PDA, and that can also that can be put down as just, I'm using air quotes now, naughty behaviour. But when you unpick the behaviours, which is what my job and a lot of excellent people's jobs out there to do, what parents will do, is you will see that actually the child is so deeply anxious about giving any sort of control away, of the fear of what might happen if they give the control over. And that is where the strategies need to be put in place to support the child, support the parents. And then once you've got a whole team approach from school, parent, and the educator, shall we say, that's when it all starts to come together. And I'm sure, you know, what Steph will mirror with what I'm saying, is that it isn't always going to be plain sailing, that there is a lot of progression and regression. And what I mean by that is you can put something in place and within 2-3 weeks everything seems okay. You know, there's not really any outbursts in behaviour. You know, there might be a few sensory difficulties that you would need to use your normal strategies with, and they're all different and individualised for every child, so I won't go into them now. But after a few weeks, when everything's going fine, they might just fall off the edge of a cliff, and then things start to escalate again. And that's where you've got to be so flexible. And that's one of the things that I took from working with these students, and also, which I was delighted to see in one of Steph's blogs that she does about PDA. She had a guest writer this week called Victoria, and I don't know where Victoria's from. I do apologise for that. But one of the 2 points that, which put 7 points, but the 2 points that jumped out to me, which I tweeted Steph back saying I thought they were superb, was being flexible and also apologising. Now, as an educator, you're not going to get everything right. As a parent, you're not going to get everything right. But if you can apologise and you can show where you got things wrong, when you didn't quite meet the expectations that you thought you were going to do, apologising, I find, mirrors good, positive social behaviour. And that's the thing that we, in the end, would like the children with PDA to do, which is to give the control over, to be able to recognise when they need to be a little bit more flexible. And it's so difficult because, like I said, the inbuilt anxieties, and I think that it's just a really long job, and in my eyes it is a lifelong job, because these children who turn into adults will need a certain amount of care. They need a certain amount of strategies and provisions put in place. And that's where I think people like Steph, who are doing a blog about PDA and her experiences with her daughter, is invaluable, because actually you can track through time where things have worked, where things haven't worked, things that you've put in place, things that you've adapted over time. And it's just a really good sort of running commentary of daily life, and I think it's just superb. The other point that Steph made in the blog, before we get to Steph, because you don't want to hear me flapping my gums all day, is that being flexible, and being flexible is the key, you know. And I think that we all as educators at times can get caught up in the work is the primary focus, where actually it's taken me a few years, but the work isn't the primary focus when working with autistic children and children with a PDA profile. It's that it is the social and emotional stuff that goes in place. And I think that if you're flexible, you can show that you're flexible, and you can show time after time to the child that actually, you know, we don't have to do it this way, and we are going to do it. We can go different ways about it. And, oh, well, today you want to talk about this, or today you want to learn about that. Well, why not? Why don't we just do that today? And I think that that sort of stuff goes a really long way when working with children on the autistic spectrum. And yeah, without going on too long, it obviously is a passion project for me, this, and I'm obviously very passionate and very just wanting to do a little bit of awareness and just spreading what I would like to be spread. And I think that this podcast, really at the heart of it, is for people who have had experiences to share them, so that other parents, educators, don't feel like they're isolated. And I think that's sometimes the most difficult thing, is that you want to feel a part of a network. And I think that sometimes, you know, the professionals can be very difficult to get hold of. They can be difficult to get appointments, be difficult to get meetings. During term times it might be okay, but holidays, when things get a little bit trickier, you know, the network might not be there. But with the excellent work that Steph does, is she's essentially offering a year-long round approach, and she is supporting her, as well as many other parents in the same position, as supporting other parents all year round, to show them that they're not on their own, and that they do have a voice, and that their voice can be listened to. And I think that it's just a superb thing what Steph and other parents who write blogs and do podcasts, YouTube shows, whatever they're doing, I think it's all extremely positive. And, you know, I just implore you that if you feel like you want to be a part of a network and be a part of a positive, just a positive thing, then go and read Steph's blogs on PDA. I've read a handful of them, maybe 5 or 6. I think that she's well into the 50s or 60s with the ones that she's written, and they are all very informative. You know, there's a couple I might bring up with Steph about school shoes and going through that, which I found really, really fascinating. The lengths that Steph goes to meet the needs of her daughter, and I think that it's really ingenious ways that she has done that. You know, and I think there's lots of good practice that goes on with parents out there. And unfortunately, I think that when you have a child that is diagnosed, or when they are looking to be diagnosed or have traits of, you might be left alone and feel isolated until the diagnosis comes in, or an EHCP comes in, or if things aren't going well at school. And I think that what Steph's doing is superb. And like I said, and we've just got to keep the positivity coming, spread positive stuff, and try not to be so critical on each other, which unfortunately social media seems to be a little bit negative at times. But this podcast is going to be all about positivity, all about the great work people are doing. And I would just implore you to go read the blogs if you can, and hopefully you'll enjoy this podcast day as much as I'm going to enjoy it, because I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. So the next voice you'll hear will be myself and Steph's, and we're going to go through her daughter's journey from looking like she may be diagnosed all the way through to now where she's in a new provision, and all the little speed bumps along the way. So I'm looking forward to it. So the next voice you hear will be myself and Steph's. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, and now as promised, I'm joined by Steph, who writes a blog on PDA, and it's about her daughter. Hello, Steph.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, so we'll crack on, because everyone is very busy, and I'm really thankful that you've given your time for this podcast, because I think PDA is quite a misunderstood subject, and even though it's quite spoken about quite a lot on certain Twitter feeds and stuff like that. I think that in society and in education as well, it's quite misunderstood, and it's all early days on PDA. So I'm very pleased that you're giving me your time. So we'll start off with my first question. From what age did you notice that your daughter had autistic traits, or did you not recognise anything was indifferent? So some of the parents I've interviewed before have said it was at a health visitor review where autism was first suggested. Was this the case with you, or was it different?
No, so we did have a health visitor review around the age of 2, but it was actually a little bit before that we had started. We're just concerned about her speech. Actually, she was babbling, making a lot of noise, but not really any proper words coming out. And I think because we had an older daughter who had spoken before that age, and put words together, then we felt she was maybe a bit behind with speech. So we mentioned this to the health visitor, who said, of course, that there was nothing to worry about and that they all develop at different rates. But we just kind of felt there was something. We didn't really know what, but we felt that the speech sounds were not right. So we went away and found out that you could self-refer for speech therapy. So that's kind of what we did then. Got in the waiting list for that, and it was when she was 2 and about 3 months old or something, 2 and 3 months, that we then got to see a speech therapist.
Oh, okay. When you self-referred for the speech therapist, what did they say?
Yeah, so it was the speech therapist then who I remember this very well. So I went in with Sasha, and she sat down at a little table, and I sat down with the speech therapist to discuss what our concerns were. And we just chatted through the whole usual history of how she'd been, how the birth was and everything since. And then the speech therapist just stopped and looked at me and she said, "Oh, have you noticed that she's not said anything since you came into this room?" And I was kind of like, well, she's over there sitting at a table, she's playing with whatever it was, she had a jigsaw or something in front of her, she was quite happy, she didn't, she wasn't listening to us. So it didn't really strike me as being anything unusual, but obviously it did to her. So I thought it was a strange question, but I didn't think anything of it. And then the speech therapist said, "Oh, well, I'm just going to refer you on to a paediatrician, it's just a routine check and nothing more." So I kind of went away. I knew that wasn't going to happen until after Christmas, and I still wasn't really worried, but I thought, the speech therapy part of it was in process and that would be fine. So
okay. So from the speech therapist, you went to the paediatrician then?
Yes, yeah. So that was January 2010. Just Sasha and I went along to the paediatrician. And I think by this point, so we were then 6 months or so on from where I'd first had concerns about speech. I think by that point, I was slightly curious as to why we were going to the paediatrician, and although she said it was routine, I thought there may be something more. So we probably had our senses heightened a bit, and had been watching the behaviour a bit more. But I still, didn't really expect what was going to happen, which was when we then sat down with the paediatrician, and she said, try to play some games with Sasha, do little puzzles and try and get her attention in different ways. And we'd been in the room we were there about half an hour, and Sasha tried to leave, well, not ask because her words weren't there still, but she'd grabbed the coat, tried to grab me and drag me out of the room and that kind of thing. And then, when it was clear I wasn't going because I needed to speak to the paediatrician, she went and lay on her couch and tried to cover herself with a coat. And so it was kind of little behaviours that I kind of suddenly dawned on me that I'd put all that down normally to her being tired. But it was 9:30 in the morning when we went to the paediatrician, and I suddenly thought, that's obviously I can't blame it on her being tired right now, so what is it? And then the paediatrician started to talk through with me, her behaviours and why it wasn't quite typical. And I think it was actually me who said the word autism first, although I still don't really know how I knew about it, because at that point I didn't really know anything about autism.
Yeah, so I suppose then from when you were in the paediatrician's office, that all of the pieces just started to fall into place for you then, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. I think it just, kind of highlighted, and I saw the things that she wouldn't do with the paediatrician. And I think for me, I always felt lucky that we had an older daughter, because I could see that typical behaviour and that interaction, and our older daughter would have been very good at sitting down and doing whatever the paediatrician asked, whereas Sasha just refused pretty much everything. So the paediatrician's word for her was oppositional, and that was kind of how it felt. She didn't want to do what other people were trying to engage her in doing. So yeah.
Okay, so from the paediatrician then, what was the next step after that?
Yeah, so that first meeting, she mentioned that, or I mentioned the word autism. We very briefly discussed that, and she sent me away because it was just me there with Sasha. She said, I think you should come back with your husband in about a month, and we'll discuss whether this is something you agree with. So yeah, I went home, but I think from that, the first time it was mentioned, I kind of knew it just made sense then. Everything, when I looked back on other things that had been going on, it all kind of dropped into place. So yeah, we went back the following month, and then she discussed it a bit more, but we did get the diagnosis fairly quickly.
Okay, so how long was it from then the first time when you went to the speech and language to when you got the diagnosis? Then was it months or years?
That was probably about 4 months, then 5 months maybe.
Okay, so quite quick.
So not so long. We were really lucky.
And
I always say that it's kind of weighing it up then, because I'd say to myself, well, are we lucky, or is it that she's so obviously autistic that it was so easy to diagnose?
Yeah.
So you kind of start weighing up things like that, whereas other people, friends and family say, oh, well, she just has normal, typical toddler behaviour. So it was kind of a bit of a seesaw of emotions there, but
yeah. And I suppose it would have been quite really quick for you and your family as well then, because I suppose within 4 months, you've gone from thinking something might not be quite right to then having a diagnosis. It must have been quite a shock all round.
Yes, it was. It was a surprise, but it just made sense. So I think, we accepted it very quickly.
Yeah.
Because we'd seen, obviously the behaviours were there really from birth, so it made sense.
Yeah. And what age was your daughter when the diagnosis came?
Yeah, so she was about 2.5.
Oh, okay, so quite young then.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's it. I think if they can see it out, when she's so young, then it must be quite, not severe, but very obvious. But it wasn't really. That wasn't the case. I think we were just extremely lucky with the paediatrician we saw and how experienced she was.
Yeah. No. Exactly. So I'm not sure if I'll be fast forwarding too much now, but when was PDA mentioned? Is that a long time in the future, or was that quite recent afterwards?
It wasn't actually mentioned to me by anybody. It was something that I came across when researching on the internet, and the kind of driving. When we left the paediatricians, we were signed up for the local autism advisory service, who at the time I think I put in my blog that it was something like a 6-week wait, and we thought that was terrible to have to wait 6 weeks for some help. But again, obviously having learned much since, so many parents are waiting so much longer for even the diagnosis that I feel bad now even thinking that. But we did have some autism advisory input so this was when Sasha was obviously still preschool. We did have somebody who'd come to the house for an hour a week in term time and try and work with her. So we did have that kind of support. But the only other thing we got then was a leaflet about a local support group, and through that, then I found out about one which was specifically for parents of girls with autism.
Okay.
Because there tends to be a split, between the ways girls present and the ways boys present. So there was a group of mums who all had girls, and I'd go along to those and share a coffee with these other mums. And it was great to meet them. But I'd sit there and I'd listen to what they're saying, and I'd think, oh, but Sasha's not really quite like those girls. And they were all parents of high functioning girls, or girls who've been diagnosed with Asperger's. And it was just kind of the things they were doing, and obviously talking and those kind of things seemed a bit different to my experiences. So that kind of led me back to looking, on the net, more research. And I came across something called PDD-NOS.
Okay.
Which is pervasive development disorder not otherwise specified, which is a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
And it's actually not diagnosed much in this country, but it is quite common in America. But it's kind of, as it says, so PDD, pervasive development disorder, is what autism kind of falls under. That's the overriding spectrum name, as it were. But it was something that didn't slot into one of those categories. So it didn't feel like she had the classic autism, and it didn't feel like she had Asperger's. So that's kind of where I started researching, and then somehow I came across the PDA. I think it was the PDA Contact Forum at that time, which has now become the PDA Society. And just reading the characteristics and the experiences of other people on there, it was like as everyone calls it, a light bulb moment. It just made so much more sense. So it was then that I went back to the paediatrician and said, well, it sounds a lot more like this.
Okay, and was PDA something that the paediatrician had a bit of experience in, because it is still relatively new, and I would say from in my position where I'm autism specialist, I was in a special school, now in a mainstream school, that even in the special school maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was then sort of, you'd hear PDA and think, well, what's PDA? I'm not really 100% sure. And we had the PDA Society come down and did bits of work with us, which was excellent, but it still felt like it was a real new thing that wasn't really spoken about that much.
Yeah, and I think sadly for some that is still the case, but no, back then, so the paediatrician, again, I think we were lucky that we had a great paediatrician. I think she knew of it, she'd heard of it, whether she'd probably have seen other cases of it locally, but I think she felt that her hands were maybe a bit tied in that she wasn't able to give that as a diagnosis.
Okay.
And, because it didn't fall under the manuals or under what her healthcare, manual said.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't denied. We were, listened to, but it got to where it wouldn't be given. And then I think what I did then was go away, read a bit more, and I asked for a second opinion because I'd heard of the Elizabeth Newson Centre.
Yeah.
And I was so sure at that time. And then what happened for us is that was out of county and would have not been referred to via the NHS. So we were sent to Great Ormond Street, which, for us is a possible referral on. And we went to Great Ormond Street for further testing. So that was, I'm thinking, when she was probably about 6. So we'd, fast forwarded about 4 years at this point.
Okay.
Talking to people.
Okay, so this was, now she was of school age. Was she
was at school at that point, yeah.
She was at school, okay. Was she still not really communicating at that point, or did
so her speech had developed, so she was fine, but the behaviour was still the same. There were issues. She had been at a nursery, a sort of standalone nursery, and I think they had struggled with her behaviour, with the understanding and with funding. And then for us, luckily again, because we had an older daughter who was already at the mainstream school at this point, we spoke to them. They had a nursery attached, so we managed to get Sasha transferred into that nursery where they were just a lot more, flexible, able to be flexible if they were attached to the school, I think. So that really helped. And she went through the school from there. So, we all worked together.
No, that sounds really positive then, that you were able to find somewhere that was a little bit more flexible then, because I think that what I'm getting from the conversation so far is that the hard work that you've put in seems to have paid off at a real early age, because you got the diagnosis within 4 months, and then you recognised there might be something else there while meeting with these mother and daughter groups for autism. And then when it wasn't necessarily going well with one nursery, the next nursery seemed to be more flexible and meet her needs a little bit better.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it was a case of listening, and like you said, I feel lucky that I'd met that group of other mums of girls, because then if I hadn't, I possibly wouldn't have realised that it was something a bit different. And I think that's one thing that's really key about PDA is the strategies are not the same as the typical autism strategies. So
no.
There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, there is. I think that that's one of the things that, again, I can recognise is that the strategies are totally different. And in my line of work, just what I'd say is for anyone else that is listening is that for me, I don't necessarily use PDA strategies. I'll rephrase that. I use PDA strategies with children that haven't got a diagnosis, because if I see that there might be something else there, you don't necessarily need the diagnosis for it to work. You just need to give it a shot.
And I think the key thing is, those strategies are nice for all children, but they're not necessary for all children. I never had to use them for my eldest daughter, so I know, it's not a typical line of parenting or, helping children generally, but it is a nice way. But it's, for children that don't need it, you don't need to do it. That's as simple as it is, really.
Yeah, exactly. Is PDA recognised then in your area of the country? Because some counties don't recognise PDA on like EHCPs and things like that.
Yeah. So and again, I think lucky because it was from such an early age, we got, so her actual diagnosis is autism spectrum disorder, but then she has a secondary line, which says about the pathological demand avoidance behaviour. So that's kind of worked, as the overriding diagnosis, and I think it's just been talking to everybody through, as she went through school. But in the county as a whole, I don't think there is a great deal of recognition. There are certain people who are great at spreading the message and trying to educate others, but it's not that people say that's we're not listening to that, but it is a battle for parents to be listened to and get that on the diagnosis or the plan in the first place.
Yeah, I agree, because I previously worked in a school in Somerset, and it is recognised in Somerset. They give a diagnosis that goes on the HCP, whereas now I'm 20 miles down the road in Dorset and it's not recognised in Dorset.
And the other thing about that is that it has been recognised for a long time by the Autism Education Trust, and it's in all their documents. So the information is out there, and great guidelines for educational handling and that type of thing. But so it's a bit, doesn't feel right to me to say that people are saying they don't recognise it. It's definitely there. Yeah, no,
it is really difficult. When I actually interviewed for the job in Dorset, they asked me about what I knew about PDA, and luckily, because of my experience, I was able to rattle on for about 15 minutes before they told me to stop talking. But I think that it is one of those things that actually, if you sort of don't know until you know, and I think that sometimes it's sort of just brushed under as not good behaviour, rather than actually
I think there's a feeling that parents are trying to use it as an excuse, which is so wrong, because you wouldn't really pick this. There's no benefit in saying a child has this over having classic autism or Asperger's, really. So it's parents are only saying it's this if they really feel their child fits into these characteristics.
Yeah, exactly. I 100% agree. So I'm going to backtrack slightly with my next question. So what were the areas of most concern for you at the time? So did your daughter struggle in social situations? So I've got down examples like haircuts and play groups and stuff like that.
Yeah, so again, because we had the older daughter, we were going along to kind of the tumble tops and the children's groups, and Sasha, although she was younger, would not be content to sit in a class with her older sister dancing around or join in or anything. So it became that we couldn't really carry on with those. It got too difficult, because Sasha would literally scream to leave. Or when she did get a bit older herself, and I think her sister was at school, then I'd try again. And we went to a music group, and I remember Sasha just running up and down the hall, loving the sound of her own feet, but not happy to sit and listen, not really appreciating that someone else was in charge. There was always this kind of not understanding, the hierarchy and other things going on. So the social side, she wasn't picking up things, which my eldest girl obviously could without being told. I think it's one of the interesting things actually about autism. I say, it makes you think how amazing other children are, that they learn, how close they should stand next to someone, or when they pick up cues for conversation and things like that. They almost do that without being taught, whereas, for Sasha, that's not the case. It was kind of a lack of awareness of lots of those things, and, still is. It's something you always have to work on. So. Yeah,
it's all those like social etiquette and things like that you just seem to pick up, that children with PDA profile or with with children who are autistic, they almost have no understanding or even like regard for it, because it's just like, well, it doesn't directly affect me, so I'm okay. I'm going to just do what I'm happy doing.
In their own little world, that's often said, I think.
Yeah. So when your daughter started school, so she went to the nursery next door to the first school, is that right?
Well, so originally she'd been at a standalone nursery, and then she switched into the nursery before she started in reception there at a mainstream school. Yeah.
Okay, so when she started at the mainstream school in primary, she had the EHCP and she had a allotted amount of support.
Yes, and no. We did apply for an EHCP quite quickly, but I think I was quite keen to not, make that me against the school. It was something I did before she started school to try and, get that ball rolling and the paperwork in place. And it was to kind of, for me, it was always more about getting, all the paperwork and all the people together and, get everyone to understand together as opposed to, actually detailing what support she got back then. The very first statements she had they were more about the kind of small group work she would do, this type of thing, so they weren't so specific about timings and who would help her. It was, a lot more fluid, shall we say, but it worked well at that point.
Okay, so from primary school then I know that there was a period where it broke down. How long after when she started was that?
Yeah, so this was year 5. It was last year, summer of last year. Things have been getting progressively more difficult. I think I always thought we would get to this point at some point, but I didn't really know when it would happen. And actually, I'm probably amazed that she lasted through the school as long as she did, because that the social issues are still there. But for Sasha, that the PDA specifically meant that she wouldn't, she struggled to engage in work. So although she is academically able, she is not able to, sit and take a test when all the other children do, for example, or to sit and listen and engage with something which she's not understood in the first place. So she would take herself out of those situations. So the need for her to have help fully increased as she got older, and there's more demands put on the children to sit still and, do what they're told and listen and try and grasp more difficult concepts. So we could see it becoming more difficult, and she had more help as the years went on. She had a great TA for a couple of years who, really understood Sasha and got the best from her. And then in year 5, there's a lot more preparation for SATs, which is something we knew Sasha would never sit down and do. She'd done the year 2 ones, funny enough, but it's been on her own in a room at very, ad hoc times. The school had been very flexible about how she'd sort of managed to do that testing. We couldn't really see it carrying through to year 6. I think because the workload had stepped up so much. There were a few sort of smaller incidents, and we knew that she wasn't enjoying it anymore, and we tried to work our way around that, but just got to a point last summer where she'd just had enough really and said so, and that was it. Couldn't persuade her back in.
I'm actually really surprised that not surprised, but I'm quite fascinated that she managed to last until year 5. If it was that sort of, if it was, maybe it might have been that with each year the demand sort of increased slightly academically, and maybe that's where the anxieties and the sort of avoidance sort of came in possibly. But I find that quite fascinating that she lasted.
And I think because as well, from infant to junior school, there was a change in schools that are across the road, so 2 separate sites and new staff and new building and everything. So she had to deal with that at year 3, but the work done by the schools at that point was brilliant, and they eased her into the new school. And like I said, then she had a great, so it was difficult to start with, but then a great teaching assistant was placed with her, and she got the best from her. It was, and I think, the slight difference for us again with when I think about all the mums of girls with Asperger's was that Sasha wasn't so aware of her differences still at this point. So it was probably during year 5 where she became more aware that she was different from the other girls. So although she had a great peer group who stayed with her all the way through school, and there were some lovely children in that class who would be friends with her, but Sasha, or the PDA, is very controlling, and so that the kind of play in the playground is not reciprocal really. I think that gulf became bigger, especially as the other girls matured more, and they wanted to talk about pop stars or makeup or boys or whatever it was, and it wasn't really a level that Sasha could converse on. So I think she then began to notice the difference more. So that social side of things did play a part. But as well as the demands of the actual work, so 2 things together really. Yeah.
What about the behaviour policy at the school? So was it quite flexible and fluid, and did it take into the account of the additional needs? And I suppose one of the things that I see a lot of, which I, through my 10 years or so working in schools, is a lot of exclusions and isolations and things like that for autistic students. And was this the case with your daughter?
No. So again, we were lucky, I think, on a couple of counts there. Sasha's never been aggressive or violent. You know, when she has an outburst, she might get to screaming, you know, a lot, and with very intense rage as she's got older, actually. But it's never directed at anyone or anything. So she's not damaged property or, you know, hurt people. So that's kind of one thing, you know. And often girls are unnoticed in the classroom because they tend to be quieter and try and fit in. For Sasha, she didn't really try to fit in. She was always herself. So we used to say she was the same at school as she was at home, in that if she found something too difficult, she would just refuse to do it, you know. And when she was younger, that would be by going into a mushroom or pretending to sleep or whatever. As she got older, you know, she'd just kind of refuse and want to take herself away from wherever it was. So, you know, trying to get her into assembly, for example, became very difficult. But the school were very flexible about that, to a point. There's always obviously the numbers game and, you know, how much the extra support cost to manage that. But yeah, they were very, very good at juggling.
Okay, well, that sounds really good that they almost adapted as the years went on. Then they didn't just offer one set thing and just hope that would fit. So yeah, that's really positive. So that provision broke down. Was that for year 5? Is that when it broke down?
That was last summer. Yeah.
Okay, and so there was a transition then. So she moved over to another school. Is that a SEN school, a special school?
It is, yes, but it wasn't quite as quick as that. So she stopped school in the June, and then, of course, it was not long till the summer holidays anyway. We called an emergency EHCP review, and that happened at the beginning of the September term, and we requested at that point an SEN, a learning disability school. It is, in this county, there is nothing between a mainstream and a learning disability school. So our kind of options are very limited. But we knew that it would take a change of school. There was no problem with the mainstream school that we'd been at. You know, they tried everything to help Sasha, so it was literally her not fitting in. There was no point trying a different mainstream school. It wasn't about, you know, the people as such. It's about her, you know, Sasha's ability. So yeah, we applied for a place at a special school, and that didn't happen the first time. They said no the first time the panel met, and then finally, well, the panel met again then just before Christmas, and then yeah, it was agreed that she could go to our local special school.
Okay, so
she's just started at that since Christmas. So in fact, it was she's only been there about 2.5 weeks or so now.
Okay, so did at the emergency case review, did they offer other mainstream schools then?
It was discussed, but I think, you know, everybody was in agreement. And again, that's something, because I think all along the way, you know, that people who've been involved can see what Sasha is really like. There isn't the masking that is common for a lot of girls. So I think everybody was in agreement with us that it wasn't going to work and that we needed a different environment. And to be fair, I think everybody agrees that she needs a different environment that there isn't available in this county. You know, our ideal would be some kind of autism-based attached to a mainstream where she could still, you know, have some kind of social interaction with, you know, children as she has been used to. But it was kind of, you know, for us, this was the option that we needed to go for, and everybody, luckily, agreed with us eventually.
So I'll just backtrack slightly. So in your county, there's no, say, autism base within a mainstream facility. It's just separate units.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, and there's no autism-specific school at all. So that there are learning disability schools, and there's either moderate learning disability or severe learning disability.
Okay. Because in Dorset at the moment, there's a big thing around that they're trying to build this £350 million autism school where it would hold like 500 autistic students there. But I think it's one of those things with funding as well that I'm not sure they ever really get it off the ground, and I think it's one of these that the money will get siphoned into other schools, I think. So I think that's Right, I'm nearly at the end. We've rattled through this, which is quite positive. So, just started the new school within a couple of weeks. What did your daughter do in the meantime between the June and December or January then? Was she homeschooled?
So she was at home. The nature of pathological demand avoidance means that she's not happy with any kind of demands being put on her, and anything certainly to do with schooling and learning is not something that she sees happening at home. And I think that, for me, that's why we followed or went down this route to the special school, is because that's what Sasha has requested. She wants to be with other children, and she wants to be with other children who are more like her. But she doesn't want to learn at home. I would be quite happy, well, not quite happy, but I would go for educating her at home if I thought that was a good way she would learn. But she's not. She's resistant to any kind of method of learning. So, unfortunately, we had 8 months at home where we also didn't know how long it was going to go on for. So it was difficult to put plans in place, because every week there'd be another meeting, and we'd be looking forward to the next thing, and I'm preparing paperwork and all those sorts of things. So there wasn't, unfortunately, a lot of learning going on other than via the usual method of YouTube, which is quite surprising how much children can learn from YouTube, actually. But it is self-directed, and a lot of it is about Minecraft, sadly, but but you can pick up quite a lot from that as well. So
you can do. I use Minecraft a lot at school, actually. So, so does your daughter see school and home as almost like two separate islands then, and the two couldn't really mix?
Yes, definitely. Yes,
Okay. So I'm just looking through my last few questions, really. I mean, I think that one of the key things for me when teaching children PDA is the anxiety that these children are holding within, because it's obviously a battle to keep control, and they feel safe when they're in control. How do you try and take some of the control away when you're at home? Are there certain strategies that you use, like if you wanted to go out, or is there a lot of pre-learning and
there is definitely. There's so much involved. That's why I say nobody would want to do this if they didn't have to. It's much easier to parent in a typical way, but it does totally open your eyes to a new way of parenting, and understanding about control and why you as a parent do decide that certain things have to happen in a certain way, and some of it you can really start to think about and question. Is everybody else crazy really trying to do certain things? But it's not natural that the way I have to parent her, and like you said, there's a lot of pre-work goes in. I'm just looking back to think that toothbrushing is one area where when she was younger she wouldn't do it at all for probably a couple of years. I'm hoping my dentist is listening. But we're lucky that she only drinks water, so she didn't have any issues, and she doesn't. She has great teeth, luckily. But we have now got into a pattern where she will brush once a day. It's just because it's become a routine, and it was a thing to do in the morning. So, I've had to let go of the want for her, to do them again at night time. It's just not that important, because it was causing too much anxiety to have to do that. So some things we have to let go. There's another example would be she always has to sit in the front seat of our car with next to whoever's driving. So our older girl sadly has to sit in the back seat, which is not nice. Normally you'd expect an older sibling to be able to go up front, but that's kind of driven by an anxiety over travelling as well. So a bit of feeling travel sick, but just whole anxiety over travelling anywhere, and fears about. Luckily we've not broached the whole fears about car accidents, but certainly travelling by train, she has fears about leaving things behind. She has fears about natural disasters like water and flooding. So if it's raining, it can be difficult to get out of the house. So there's so much that goes into, like you said, getting out of the house on any day. We do spend a lot of time indoors, and she spends a lot of time, engaging in the activities that she wants to. But it is difficult to persuade her. Luckily, she enjoys swimming. We've been out swimming this morning, so that's something that more often than not I can persuade her to do. But it has to be on her to when she wants to which place she wants to go. In all of this, our sibling tends to slot in, and she's been great. I think again lucky that she's 2 years older and she's not known much different, because it was, always like this with her sister. So that the way we've gone, through things has been the same, but we try and obviously make that up to her in other ways, and we've always been very open with her about what's going on, and where she would see that her sister isn't getting into trouble for making a mess. It's kind of explaining that actually Sasha's not really aware why she's doing that. She has a thing about shredding tissues at the moment. That's a sensory thing, so she can make a huge amount of mess very quickly, but it's almost subconsciously. So we can't, there is no point trying to punish for that and tell her if she didn't do it, she wouldn't get any iPad, because that it wouldn't stop her doing it, because it's kind of a need that she's not aware of, and, just the outcome of that and us trying to impose our will on her is not really worth living with. So.
No, and also it will just create a higher end of anxiety for her and everyone else around her, I suppose, because...
And, for a sibling, I think that's it, a sibling sees that we live a fairly calm life because of the way we're having to manage things, but it works for us. We're not big on shouting and, having those sort of arguments out here, so, we get on with it.
Yeah, and I think that's also key about the... about tone of voice and things as well, because these are certain things that, in my experience, that... autistic children with PDA don't necessarily understand anyway, so you're sort of wasting your breath if you...
Yeah. Although actually for our girl, she will get, if you raise your voice sometimes, well, we don't raise our voices, but sometimes when she knows that we're disappointed, like if I walk in and see the room covered in the shredded tissues, and I'll just say, oh Sasha, can you not do that? But in a not very aggravated voice, but just quite soft, but she still knows, even then, that, we're upset, and then she's upset, because she hasn't meant to do it, and the anxiety behind it, that is quite difficult to see, actually.
Yeah. Just before I let you go, because we've been going for a while, is there any other support that you are being given now, like with the transition and stuff? Does she have a key adult in the new school, or is there a point of contact there that you speak with, or is it more professionals, or is it even just now parental input that you get? Because as I said in my introduction before I got on the line with you, is that I think that parent on parent feedback and discussing things with each other is almost more powerful at times than the professionals, because the professionals may not be available all year round, and you may wait weeks and weeks to speak to someone, and I think that
and that they're all very busy, like you said, as well, and I think that's the difficult thing, but I think the professionals don't necessarily have all the answers, and especially PDA, which is newer. There's not as much, people haven't had as much time to go away and research it. Obviously, I've been engulfed in it since birth, so there's been a lot of time for me to get used to it and get used to Sasha specifically. So, but along the way, I definitely agree it's other parents who have the most information, even generally, about autism and support services in the county. So there have been certain good professionals involved with us along the way, and we've been lucky about that. But right now there isn't, and that's probably a lot of the time, to be honest, there hasn't really been anybody else. It's just us managing through it, and it's keeping up with others that has helped us get along. So I always recommend to anybody, when I'm through the blog and the groups I'm in, that they try and find other local parents to them, because just to talk to other people who can understand is really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sometimes parents can feel a little bit isolated and almost think that they're doing something wrong or not doing something right, and it can be a really daunting place. Like in my role, where I speak with parents daily, you can feel that anxiety, because parents want you to understand and they don't want to feel judged. And I think that if everyone's on the same page and parents have an output of and there's someone to speak to, then I think that it's just all positive, which is why I enjoy your blog so much, because it's just little bits of information out there, and it gives a little bit of an insight into daily life. And there's so many bits that I read, and I just have a little smirk and just think, and then I think, So
I think that's why I started it really as a diary. It was for us, and it was for our parents, so that the Sasha's grandparents who don't live so locally, and it was because she was so young, and the standard kind of idea was, but that's just what all toddlers do. And so it was trying to get in what she did that was different to, what our oldest daughter had done and what made her different, really. So that's how it started off as an online diary. But I think as I've gone along, it's still very personal. It's a blog that's personal to us and our story, so I can't claim to know about lots of other stories, but I have done, I've trained other parents on behalf of the PDA Society, so I've kind of helped them understand, and so through that I've learned from their stories, and I've always also done this series about, called Our PDA Story, where lots of other parents have written to me with examples of how their lives have gone with, living with a child with PDA, or adults who have PDA as well, and it's just really interesting, but it's now to be able to share those, because I do think there's so many parents out there still who not even been judged by others, it's I think they judge themselves. They don't understand why those typical strategies are not working, and you keep on at it because you just believe that is what society expects, or the way you were brought up, and that a child should behave in a certain way, and it's kind of, I think parents have to let go of that and appreciate that there are different ways of doing things before you can really help the child and yourself. So now I kind of carry it on to try and reach as many parents as possible, because like I said, I think there's still lots out there who are being given other diagnoses that are not right, or who are trying to force the children one way when those strategies are really not helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one final point before I do let you go is that sometimes it can be difficult when there's progression and regression as well, because at some point there's, you put things in place, you think this is going really well, you have a couple of weeks or months, and then another issue will pop up. And sometimes I've seen, education professionals and parents that get down on themselves and think, oh, well, I've just done that, and now there's this, and I'm not really sure if I'm going the right way, and there's a lot of self-doubt, which is why I think your blog is really good, because it sort of tracks a lot of that sort of thing. It's sort of, this is what happened, this is where it went, this is where we went after that, and
yeah. Because you've got to remember, the children, they're still developing like other typical children would, and there's still going to be the puberty and the different growth spurts and all those kind of things. So yes, things are going to change. They're never the same. But
no, it just varies over time. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I'm going to stop recording now. I just want to say thank you for giving me your time, and it's been really interesting. I've actually been looking forward to this, which might make me sound a little bit geeky, but I've been looking forward to it because it's just another avenue, I think, for people just to get that little bit of support, and just it's just interesting to see from different people's points of view. I think that's what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so just finishing up now, I just want to say thank you to Steph again for giving me her time. Really, really interesting chat. I think that, as she said quite a few times there, she feels quite lucky that she got the support quite early on. I think that it is a testament to parents like Steph that read up on things and know, I suppose, to fight that battle for their children, and know that something might not be quite right here. And I know there's lots of people that go through that, and unfortunately, like myself and Steph said then on the line, that sometimes it can take years or months or whatever to get a diagnosis. And I think that, in my opinion, if you look at some of the blogs and you read up on things with other parents, and you just get a view of what other parents might say as well as the professionals, it might give you a whole rounded approach. Also, don't be afraid to speak to schools, because there's excellent schools out there that will also offer extra support and will be willing to evidence things for you if you are looking for a diagnosis of autism or PDA. I am going to finish up now. I've got lots of new projects on the go. Just before I finish, I've been in contact with AFC Bournemouth. AFC Bournemouth are a Premier League football team who are very local to me, actually. I live in Yeovil now, but when I lived in Bournemouth for 23 of my 28 years. And what AFC Bournemouth have done is they have set up a sensory bag and provisions for people with autism who go to the football matches, which I think is superb, because no other Premier League team offers that sort of thing. And although, I'm going to read the statement in a second that they've sent to me, but although they are at the very infant stages of this, the positive steps they've put in place already is very, very good. So they have said that we're working very closely with Autism Wessex and looking specifically at the matchday experience for our autistic supporters. We firstly carried out training with our matchday stewards and our frontline staff, and we have just recently launched our Matchday Sensory Packs, which in their Sensory Pack you get a softball with the AFC Bournemouth logo on, ear defenders, a lanyard as well, which you can get other. I know they offer at Exeter Airport, where it just is clear to staff that it is an autistic person who might need extra support, and also they get given a menu of what foods are available in the ground as well, and I think that there's a pre-book thing with food as well, which is very good. They've also invited surface users of Autism Wessex to each of their youth and under 21 matches that were held in the stadium, so they could get a view of what each match day is like. And they're also looking at the use of a room to act as a quiet room for supporters to access during a match day if it is needed, which is something that Culture City in America have offered. And if you're a big sports fan like me, you'll know that the Super Bowl, American football, and the Pro Bowl are big events, and at both of those events Culture City set up 2 sensory rooms there that were open for the whole game. They had sensory bags. They were able to go through security in a different way, and it just seemed like a really positive experience. And I was messaging them on Twitter a few months ago, actually said that there's nothing like this in England, and I'm quite surprised that there isn't. But, you know, AFC Bournemouth have put some excellent things in place. I think that it is very interesting that they are the first Premier League team to do it, because if you do follow football, you know that AFC Bournemouth, that have the smallest stadium in the Premier League, holds about 11,000, whereas there's other stadiums in the Premier League which has 80 plus thousand capacity, and there's nothing really there to support the autistic population. So I'll be really interested to see if this is a boom where it's all going to take off, or if it's just going to be specific to AFC Bournemouth at the moment. I have requested to do an interview with them, which I'm waiting to come back with, because I think it'd be really interesting for you to hear their voices as well. Also, what I've seen is that Olsen Towers are offering a sensory bag as well. And all these things are just positive, really, really positive things. And I'm just pleased that there's a lot more acceptance and awareness now of autism, that these businesses and companies are looking into just supporting a little bit more. Thank you for listening to this podcast. As I said, it's a massive passion project of mine. It is a homemade podcast that was all over the phone. I'm literally sat at my dining room table now. My wife and daughter have gone out for the afternoon to allow me to do this, which I'm very thankful for. So I think I might have to cook dinner tonight. Any questions, just hit me up on Twitter. It's at the Sensory Hour Podcast. You'll find this on YouTube, the official YouTube channel, the Sensory Hour. And yeah, thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing your feedback and lots more to come. So keep listening. Thank you.